So we are waiting for one more speaker, and after that we'll get kicked off. But I think we can get kicked off, and if he comes, we can come around. Okay, so I'm gonna introduce myself, and then we can start with the panel. My name is Xiye Bastida. I'm a climate justice activist from Mexico, and I've been in the climate space for about 3 years now. This is my third COP. And I'm so happy to see how much it has changed. It's so important for us to be at these spaces and for people to know that we're not just a symbol. We're not just a symbol of the injustice, of the generational injustice. We're not just a symbol of what's happening in our communities. We're also powerful, and we have voices, and we can affect the decisions that are happening in the negotiation rooms. And this panel right now is going to be a huge example of two avenues that we can take as an international community to criminalize ecocide and also to make sure that it is brought into International Court of Justice, to ask for an advisory from the International Court of Justice to see what countries have to do for our human rights and the rights of nature. So, our last panelist is here, so we can officially start. So I'm going to give a little bit of background on Ecocide so that everybody is on the same page. So Ecocide is acts that threaten the widespread and long-term harm to nature. And we are, the aim is to put it in the International Criminal Court, the ICC. This international court deals with genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. And the recognition of ecocide in the International Climate Court would be a huge step in indicating the relationship that human health has with the health of nature. The other quest right now is the legal advisory opinion on the responsibility that states have with respect to climate change in context to human rights. So this very wordy stuff, but it's basically the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, that is sometimes known as the World Court. You can ask an advisory from them. So countries can come and say, can you please give an advisory to our countries to see how we can deal with this human rights issue? This would put ecocide on the path towards being recognized as harming human rights, which is another huge step if we want to get ahead on the legal pathways towards protecting nature. And I think this is something that for me is very important, which is indigenous communities have always known that protecting nature is part of who we are. And using the legal system is a way of bridging indigenous wisdom with the more Western legal avenues of protecting people. So I think this is just the merging moment that we've all been waiting for, and it's finally happening. So we'll begin our discussion with the progress on the advisory opinion campaign. And for this, we are delighted to have with us Mert from the World's Youth for Climate Justice. Mert, woo! Yes, please give it up for Mert. He is a former UN Youth Representative on Human Rights and Security for the Netherlands and a campaigner for the World's Youth of Climate Justice. He combines his human rights background with a variety of climate-related themes. In his work and activism, he focuses specifically on human rights violations that take place due to the climate crisis. So please, Mert, the floor is yours, and please tell us how these are connected and give us a background.
Thank you so much, Xiye, for this wonderful introduction. Thank you all, and it's a great honor to be here. One of the first actual panel and side event at the Children and Youth Pavilion. And I'm glad to be here with all of my friends from the Pacific and from World Youth for Climate Justice. You can see them with like the stickers on their backs and the shirts, so they will give you some merch and they'll explain everything to you. But indeed, there's two campaigns. So Xiye just said we have the International Court of Justice Advisory Opinion Campaign. That's a campaign which we're currently trying to fight for. And it started out more than 3 years ago in the Pacific, when Pacific Island students came together and looked into ways on how to seek effective climate justice. And they got inspired by an attempt to seek this justice at the International Court of Justice, the world's highest court, to get an advisory opinion of that court. And when they tried and seeked, they saw that they couldn't themselves apply or an advisory opinion. Only member states can do that, UN member states. So I'm delighted to see that Willy from Vanuatu, the country that took on that leadership, is here to tell more about the campaign. And especially, yes, Vanuatu. Also applause for Vanuatu for sure. Um, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get an advice of the court to clarify the legal obligations that have emerged from the Paris Agreement. Because we all know how great it was back in 2015 when we had the Paris Agreement. It was the first time ever that countries came together and said, we're going to tackle this. 1.5 is still alive. And the only problem is that we have seen in the past years is that all of these member states have failed to effectively remedy these causes of the climate crisis. So that's why we're asking the court, we're seeking the court for this advisory opinion. It's not litigation. So we're not saying court X or court Y or country X or country Y, we're putting a blame on you. No, we're saying we're asking the court to clarify it. How are our human rights being affected by the crisis? And how can we prevent future climate crisis catastrophes from happening? Because just to be clear, 1.5 degrees is, for us, might be an inconvenience in the West, for example. But for the people in the Pacific, it means that their homelands will be gone. So it's not a matter of how, but it's a matter of when we get this AO. Because we need this advisory opinion, and we need your support for this as well. We need you to go back to your member states, to your governments, to your delegations to promote. If I'm looking at you right now, I'm looking at least 100 new campaigners for our cause. And you'll get there in a bit. But what we really are needing right now is like 3 call to action points. And the first one is when the resolution is made public, available in mid-November, somewhere in mid-November, UN member states should not water down the text of the resolution. This will result in a weak advisory opinion, and it also affects the attempt of the court to deliver a good statement. So we need to have a strong resolution with strong wording so that the court can also make sure that in the future, when we have the advisory opinion, we can actually use it as a legal template, as a legal basis for future climate action and climate justice. Second of all, we should also have that states should be ambitious and brave about the formulation of this advisory opinion, of this resolution. Considering that we need to include past, present, and future generations into this to help the ICJ in delivering a climate just worthy advisory opinion. It's not only the generations that are currently living, no, we're especially focusing on those generations to come after us. So of course we need to have a simple majority of votes. This means that in the UN General Assembly, somewhere in either December 2022 or January 2023, the vote will take place. Vanuatu, together with a core group of member states, naming a few, are Artico and Barbuda, Costa Rica, Mozambique, Angola, Germany, Samoa, Morocco, Bangladesh, Singapore, Uganda, New Zealand, Vietnam, Romania, and Portugal, to name a few. Also, the Federated States of Micronesia, for example, are all part of the core group of member states that will take this to the UNGA. And we need a simple majority. And we can only get that majority if you go back to your delegations, to your member states, to your people, to your country, and seek for this. Ask for this. Demand climate justice. We're not here to ask anymore. We did the asking back in Kyoto, back in Rio. We're here to demand climate justice. So the thing is, right now, when we look at the advisory opinion as it is right now, the current amount of countries, we're looking very positive. We're seeing a lot of positive noises and positive sounds. We see that, Willy can elaborate on that in a bit, we see that young people are getting their courts to be ambitious, getting their countries to be ambitious. And I want to tell one thing, I want to explain you one thing. We always talk about how we could empower the youth. If I'm looking here today, we are empowered. We have the power to change the course of history. We have the power to change the course of the climate crisis. We don't need more empowerment. We are empowered. We need those who are in power to depower themselves, to give us a chance. And that's why we're here today. That's why we're here the coming 2 weeks. And please, if you want to help us to seek climate justice, reach out to all of my amazing friends here in the public. Go to the Moana Blue Pacific Pavilion and let's get this advisory opinion. And we say, AO, let's go. So one more time. AO, let's go. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think, sometimes we also have, this is better. Sometimes we also have a gap when it comes to us, in the streets asking for climate justice, or us here at COPs asking for climate justice, but we often lack the pathways to get this on paper, get this with meaningful resolutions. So this is a very practical, thing that can get us a lot of background, and it can get us a lot of support for when we actually go to our governments and we say, you have to abide by this because the World Court said it. And it really is, one of those legal things that we can point to, that we can be, they can be very useful, not only in the international level, but in the local level at our country states. So thank you so much for that. I feel like I know what I'm going to go to say to my countries, and that is something really important. So, and when you said I'm just going to name you named so many, so that's also so nice to hear that there's so many countries already on board. Next up, we are going to go to Jojo. So Jojo Mehta is an amazing woman. I have had the privilege of knowing her for a long time now. And she is the co-founder and executive director of the advocacy organization Stop Ecocide International and chair of the charitable Stop Ecocide Foundation, which supports the participation of climate vulnerable states in the growing global conversation on ecocide. So Jojo is going to give us, she actually was a convener of the independent expert panel for the legal definition of ecocide, so she was part of crafting what that means. And I'm going to ask Jojo to please tell us more about the origins and the progress of this global conversation, and what can we expect in the coming months and at COP27.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Okay, so this is the second of the two legal avenues that we're addressing today, and it's a complementary one to the advisory opinion. This one is in relation to the International Criminal Court, which is a different court and which deals with international crimes. So we're here looking at criminal law. And the international crimes that exist right now, and you'll all know what they are because they're war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, the crime of aggression. And what we aim to do, and our advocacy organization works on developing cross-sector support around the world for this, is to make it a crime to destroy the planet. In other words, to make ecocide, or mass damage to nature, an international crime. We also support nations who are wanting to legislate for this separately and individually as well, because those two things complement each other. What do we mean by ecocide? It's already becoming a word that is used more and more often to describe mass damage to nature, mass deforestation, huge oil spills, destroying the seabed, and these kinds of levels of destruction which continue but which are hugely problematic and often, in fact, already illegal but not enforced. Because we have a long-standing problem in our culture, in the culture that dominates globally, which is, of course, the Western culture. And that is that we are deeply alienated from nature. We have spent centuries developing an attitude where we think we are separate, we think we can treat nature as a bank of resources, and we forget about the balance that is needed. We forget about the reciprocity that is needed. And so what we believe is that by saying serious harm to nature, which, by the way, is at the root of both the climate and the ecological crisis we are suffering, if we put that alongside genocide, we are saying it is as bad, as serious, as wrong to destroy nature at this, extreme level. We are also saying something very profound about that relationship that we have with nature. And this is incredibly important. Now, a few years ago, no governments were talking about this. Now, after a few years of our organization working at various different levels and with fantastic state allies, like, for example, Vanuatu, who is, Willy is going to be speaking for Vanuatu soon, this conversation has moved very fast. We now have over 25 countries which are members of the International Criminal Court, which have discussion of this on record at parliament level or government level. And we already have several countries actually publicly backing this move, this initiative to criminalize ecocide. And brand new news from 3 days ago in Belgium, the first European country to put a bill forward. The government is putting a bill forward to create a standalone crime of ecocide to cover the most severe and long-term damage to nature. So this is an amazing, amazing win for this. So let's go. So we're incredibly excited about this. It really helps the global conversation to move forward. And this is something that, for the first time at COP, this COP27, we have a pavilion, which is just down here, number 42. Come and see us. If you haven't already got a pin, come get a pin. Come get a program. Come and have a look what we're about. We also have an official side event for the first time. And that is really important because what it means is that at the highest level, this is being acknowledged as a key framing perspective that needs to be brought into the climate conversation, because I think we all know how frustrated we all are. There's the Paris Agreement, there's the leaders' pledges, there are frameworks here, there, and everywhere. And what is the action? It is incredibly slow. It's like, we have a Formula One race going on that needs to happen, and we have a few snails at the starting point. Yeah, that's what's happening. So by putting in place a framework that is an outer boundary that says, beyond this level of damage, it's just not acceptable. And if you do it, you are a criminal. That is actually creating a hard boundary, which is a guardrail. It's a safety rail. And it also acts as a kind of an incentive and an empowerment factor for those policymakers, those corporate leaders that know we need to be moving in a new direction. But if the rules don't change, the money just keeps flowing where it always went. And that's the frustrating thing, isn't it? We all know what needs to happen. We all know why it needs to happen. But there's a really big gap in the how it needs to happen. So by putting that framework in place, we can create that how. So this is a conversation that is growing. Our main call to action is talk about ecocide. It's not quite as immediate as the advisory opinion, because this is all going to happen really in the next few months. So this is like an immediate thing. With Ecocide, it's ongoing. We need to get more and more countries talking about it, and we advocate across society because we know that the more the conversation happens throughout different sectors, the more the politicians pay attention. They like to play it safe. They won't go to the party till everyone's already there having a good time. So let's go there. Let's stop Ecocide. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if you've all heard of a lot of countries and people in different countries are actually suing their governments for because the climate crisis interferes with our rights to happiness, our rights to a future, or rights that are more hard to prove. But with something like this, it will be very clear what rights are being violated, the rights of nature. So it would be an amazing step to take in the pathways forward for stopping deforestation, for stopping coral bleaching, for stopping, deep sea mining, which is another big thing that is happening in the ocean world. So thank you so much, Jojo, for all of the work that you have done with Ecocide. It should be part of all of our vocabularies. All of us should be talking about, criminalizing ecocide at the highest level so that all of our countries are part of that conversation. Because what happens sometimes is that the countries in the global north have amazing climate policy, but they offshore their mining, they offshore their deforestation, they offshore their drilling. So we need to make sure that this is a global thing that protects every country so that not only some are protected. Thank you again, Jojo. And next up, I'm super excited to welcome Willy Missack into the conversation. Willy is currently working with the Vanuatu government on policy making and advisory to the Vanuatu Climate Action on Disaster Risk Reduction and Climate Change Program. He is also the founder and executive director of Learn to Serve Vanuatu, a community-based organization that are working on ecosystem restoration and sustainable land management, water, and climate justice project. So Willy, please tell us what this work has been for you in Vanuatu and everything that Vanuatu has done to push it on the General Assembly, the conversation on the advisory opinion, as well as Ecocide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Good. I think I will just first of all thank Ecocide to provide us this opportunity to have this space and share about what the International Court of Justice advisory opinion work that Vanuatu government has been doing. But I think I would also like to say thank you to our fellow Pacific Island students fighting climate change. They are here. And also our fellow Pacific youths. And also all the youths around the world. I think the world is moving in a sense where youths are becoming more proactive in the spaces where we never thought they will be in there. And when we're looking at the issue of International Court of Justice, sometimes the question raised about why Vanuatu is thinking on taking that or looking on the issue of to have the advisory opinion. Back in 2018, just for a short history on that, Vanuatu has announced at COP23 that he will start looking on legal avenues for climate change issues. I think the main point is now we are at COP27 and the issues are still growing, as my colleague from Ecocide mentioned. It's moving very slow. And we believe that having the advisory opinion will help give a push within the negotiation space. I think also I'm here as a negotiator of Vanuatu government as well on loss and damage. And looking at the issue, it's been a long issue tracking down, and many languages are also start looking, when we're putting up language to advance and the progress, the issue around loss and damage and other climate issue, we find that whether out by developed country and so on. But we want to keep this negotiation going on, and also looking at how we can really help the other developed country to looking at that issue. Of course, at the moment, Vanuatu is becoming a sort of a global lead on climate justice. And Ecocide and even the law of the sea are the other avenues to explore that. I think we believe that having the advisory opinion will allow all the other countries as well to step into the area of advancing the work on climate change and trying to make no harm to people. It's all about dignity and how we prevent our current generation and also the future of the generations that are coming up. When the negotiation is slowing down, the human dignity is keep on violated, and then people are continue to lose their home. Indigenous people are losing their cultures, and all those laws are sitting there, but needs someone to stimulate it and to give a push in that area. So the government of Vanuatu was looking on that, and with these extraordinary young people from the Pacific student fighting climate change, giving their different views and supporting that, the way the Vanuatu is taking that forward. And we believe that all the young people sitting in this space, we can have a voice within our government to have a simple majority, as my colleague mentioned, for the UNGA vote for ICJAO. And it will also provide a sort of back on looking at making sure that the ecocide becoming also something that we have to put forward. And we see that more and more countries within the diplomatic area starting moving in that direction. And we are happy to see that, although it is going slowly, and we're happy to see that it advances, or it's continue to advance. I think the only thing that we see in terms of justice side, we don't see any issue on that, but this issue will become more political, to have more political will in that. To have ICJAO, there is no issue in that all the justice system. It's only political will. And this is what we also as Vanuatu are encouraging our young people sitting around here to find spaces with their government to make sure that they have to contribute on the vote for the UNGA on ICJAO. I think this is where we look at it. We don't see any thing that will stop us or moving us in on a justice perspective, but only now it nails down to only political will. So we trusted you, and we believe in you, and we believe in the young people's power to move things forward. And we are looking forward for you as well to raise up the voices around your government and around the people and your communities to make sure that we have that for the betterment of the world. Thank you.
Hey, Mariana.
Thank you so much. This is a good time to remind everybody of the role that island states have had on climate policy around the world. Because of island states, we got the 1.5 degree target instead of the 2-degree target. Because of island states, we're moving forward with the conversation of who is the most affected, which are youth and island nations, communities of color around the world. Vanuatu was actually the one that brought the conversation of Ecocide to the Hague in calling on the International Climate Court's Assembly of States of Parties to seriously consider adding Ecocide in the Rome Statute. So the leadership of island nations cannot be understated. So thank you so much for all of the work that Vanuatu and other island nations have done to bringing the issue of the climate crisis to very serious terms and encouraging all of us to lead that with you as well. Next up, we have Daniela Miranda. Daniela is the 26-year-old coordinator of the policy department at 1.5 and young negotiator of the Chilean delegation at COP26 in Glasgow on adaptation and gender issues. Amazing. And in academia and research centers in the area of climate change and disaster risk management and gender. She is a climate change focal point in UNICEF Chile, and she has a BA in sociology and is now a master's student in political science and international relations. Currently, she's doing an exchange in the Paris School of International Affairs at Sciences Po. So please, Daniela, can you give us some perspective on why these legal avenues are so needed and why youth are so critical?
Thank you very much. And thank you for the space and the opportunity to be here in this first event of the Pavilion. So we need to understand the how, right? And I think a very important part of the how is protecting the activist. And why international courts and why international spaces? We need to understand that this is a cross-cutting issue. It's going all over the world, and it doesn't have any border. So we need something to have an international perspective, right? And also there are times when the same government and state policies are criminalizing the activist and the actions that we can take to protect the environment. For example, Latin America is the most dangerous place to be an activist. Just to give you a number, more than 3/4 among the more than 200 environmental and land defense activists that were killed in 2021 around the world were from Latin America, and just 54 from Mexico. Like we that this is an important thing to tackle, right? And we need this space in the international courts and organizations that understand that this is a systematic issue, and this is a thing that we can need to solve and advocate and recommend the states and activists how to do it, right? And well, this is why it's important to have these spaces. So why youth? What's our role here, right? It's our role to show the world, our friends, our families, the government and decision makers, the injustice. In this case, we're trying to show the climate injustice, right? And we need to have specific proposals, specific ways to take action. And this is what we're doing here right now. And for example, in Latin America, we had a regional COE right after our local COE in Chile, where we could draft 10 specific proposals for decision makers and large emitters. So we're doing this, and we're being so specific because we can do this, right? And we also cannot ignore the fact that it's now the time that we have the knowledge, the time, and the energy, because we're young, right? We have the energy right now, and maybe we cannot have it forever. So we need to take action right now. And most of us are doing this probably voluntarily, parallel our studies and working. So we really need a lot of energy to do this. And we are already at this level. So we've been through a lot to be here. So it's a thing that we cannot ignore, that we need the time, energy, and it's now. And there are many people who maybe would like to be here at these spaces, but due to circumstances and other problems, they cannot. So it's also our role to give them the places and the spaces so they can express themselves. And so, yeah, I'm really proud for being part of this generation that we have the right proposals, specific proposals and actions. And so we need to just move forward to our decision makers, because we have proposals, we have actions to do, but our power is limited. So we need to act. So these international courts are also a great opportunity to protect ourselves and to have another way to get this knowledge and to make these actions go to the decision makers. So thank you very much for this. I'm very proud of this to be here.
There are two things that you said that really stood out to me. The first one is, sometimes land defenders are criminalized in places like Brazil, and why cannot we hit back and say, when we decriminalize the destruction that you're doing, which is the simplest way to put it. The second thing that stood out to me was when you talked about language, which is you have very specific language in the resolutions that we're coming up with. If you haven't yet read the Global Youth Statement, I recommend that you do, which includes all of the UN language that we are proposing as youth to go into the different negotiation tracks. So it's very important for us to know that.
Are there any further questions?
Oh, I think that's another panel's speaker. It's very important for us to recognize that the language that we might speak on panels like these has to be translated to UN official language for it to be recognized, because sometimes if it's not written in their language, they are able to get it off the floor. So we need to be very smart and strategic on how we approach language. So those are the two things that you said that really, really stood out. And now we're going to go into a short Q&A, unless somebody wants to add something very quickly. Yeah, go ahead.
So just very quickly on the climate justice aspect, Xiye already brought up the thing that if environmental defenders are being criminalized for interrupting business activity, if ecocide law is in place, then the question mark moves over the activity of the businesses, which completely reframes the defenders as moral upholders of the law. So that's one thing. The second one is that a lot of the activities that destroy nature are happening in the most affected people and areas. And in fact, the decisions that lead to them happen often in the wealthy north. And that is what this kind of crime aims at. It aims at the people of superior responsibility. So it's not about criminalizing the citizens on the ground. It's about looking at people taking responsibility at the top level. And one quick point on language, to do this, but the definition of ecocide that came out of a consensus panel last year has been incredibly powerful in getting politicians to pay attention, and it's so concise it fits on the back of a business card. We have a few here if you want to grab one. Ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. And that is language that is deeply familiar in the international law arena, but it is also very clear and understandable to anyone. So this is a really powerful definition. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you indeed. I just wanted to add one more very important thing. Because a lot of times people think when they hear the word or when they hear the words advisory opinion, that it's just an advice from the court. But it's very good to understand that the legal and moral power that comes from such an advisory opinion can change the course of how we as member states tackle and try to combat the emissions and try to combat the climate crisis in general. So it's not an advice in a sense that it's just something we can ignore, because we cannot just ignore the world's highest court. That's impossible. And that's why it's so important also in the next phase when we get that vote, when we get that simple majority, because it's not a question if, it's a question when, then the next phase will be how much young people can we get at that court? How much young people will be speaking there? How much young people will be influencing that phase 2 of this advisory opinion campaign? Because at the courts, all member states have the right to speak and to put in their own input. But we need the young people, we need you to go to your member states, to your delegations, and seek for that accountability. Ask them, tell them that you should be the one sitting in those courts giving the statements. You should be the one sitting at the table. We should not accept the fact that the climate crisis is being decided for us. No, we are taking matters in our own hands. And the advisory opinion is one of these tools that is going to happen very soon. And it's letting us to be the ones who are in charge this time. And we will not be set aside. So in that sense, an advisory opinion, I mean, is not an advice that is passive. It's an active, live thing. But it can only be active if you are active. So show that support, wear that sticker on your chest, on your heart, walk around the venue the upcoming weeks, and let the people know that you're standing for climate justice. Thank you.
So we want to see everybody with the advisory opinion sticker and also the Ecocide Love pins that are right here. All of you have now become ambassadors of these 2 initiatives, and now we can go to questions of the audience. So if anybody has questions, please raise your hands. This is an amazing panel of people who are very knowledgeable in their spaces. Yes?
Thank you. My name is Aniek. I'm from the Dutch Youth Climate Movement, and I have a question for Mert. I think World Youth for Climate Justice is an amazing initiative, and I love how youth from all over the world are already taking charge and going up to their delegations and kind of trying to convince them to stand for this advisory opinion. Maybe a question for all of us: are there specific countries that we need to go up to and convince to vote for this advisory opinion to make your battle easier?
Yeah. Very good question indeed.
It doesn't work?
Yeah, it's not so... Thank you. So indeed, it's a very good question. As you can see, I mentioned a core group of countries that before. And we're currently looking to have a lot of support from member states, in especially, for example, Africa, Asia, but also Western Europe, to have those countries to be on board. Especially because an advisory opinion should be embraced by a diverse group of member states, because the climate crisis itself is also diverse. It started out with the Pacific Island states asking and seeking for that justice, like they were the ones who initiated this. But they indicated that their core group also needed to be a diverse overview of member states that are a part of it. So it goes to show that it's not only a one topic that's only for one region. No, it's a worldwide topic. And that should also be the case for the member states that are looking for that. So I see a lot of people from different backgrounds from all over the globe. And in that sense, all of the support from every single country is welcome. Thank you.
So every country is the answer. We had a question over there. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Charlie. I work in climate education in the UK. Can you hear me now? Yeah, that's good. Okay, and so first of all, a really inspiring discussion. Thank you all for the work you do. That's brilliant. I'm actually a lawyer myself in the energy environmental sphere, so very, very inspirational what you do. My question is mainly for Jojo. So I'm really interested in terms of the work you're doing, bringing Ecocide in front of the International Criminal Court. And you were comparing it to like the law on genocide, for example. And I was just wondering, since the genocide was made an international crime post-World War II, unfortunately we have seen genocides around the world and countries have been too slow to react. So I just wanted to know, how can we ensure that if we make ecocide an international crime, how can we ensure the enforcement and make sure that countries really do follow it and that it's implemented in practice?
Thank you so much for that question. And there are sort of two aspects to this. One is that ecocide as a crime behaves a little bit differently to the other international crimes. If you're I mean, thankfully I don't know any, but let's say you're a genocidal maniac or you're a war criminal. You know, your country is unlikely to prosecute you. And so you may end up eventually at the International Criminal Court, which is a complementary court. It's the only mechanism globally that taps in directly to the criminal justice systems of its member states. So the idea is that you prosecute the prosecutions happen in the ratifying states, and if they can't or won't, then they go to the ICC. Now, with Ecocide, because it's largely the result of corporate activity rather than, you know, heads of state and so on, although there may be a few exceptions, what that means is that a prosecution could be taken in any ratifying state. So there's a breadth of possible prosecution there in a way that is perhaps not as obvious or present with the other international crimes. But there's another aspect to this. You know, making something a crime, it's not like it's going to prevent it ever happening. I mean, murder has been a crime since, what, Moses, beyond? And yet people do still get murdered. But can you imagine if murder was not a crime, what would be the case? The idea is that effectively we use criminal law to draw moral lines. That's what we use it for. Criminal law is ultimately not there to punish the perpetrators, although it does do that. That's one of the things it does. What it's there to do is prevent the crimes. You know, so if murder is a crime, it's to stop people being murdered. If ecocide is a crime, it's to act as a deterrent and a preventive. So although it's true that genocides still occur, the concept of genocide is absolutely abhorrent to everybody, in part because it has been acknowledged as an international crime. So it's hugely powerful to identify the worst harms as crimes.
That was a very good answer. Thank you, Jojo. Sorry about that. Any other questions? We have time for one more. Over there. It's okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. My question is for Jojo. Thank you for this very insightful panel. I'm also a lawyer from Kenya. I have a legal background, but also okay, sorry about that. My question is for Jojo. I'm from Kenya. I have a legal background. I'm also part of the coalition that catalyzed this pavilion. My question is, I've been following Stop Ecocide for some time now, and I know it exists more on the international sphere, kind of the meta level. My question is, for the future of this campaign, if there's any thinking about going at the more granular level to ensure that maybe there's legislation at the national level about Stop Ecocide, so that national courts, maybe in the penal code, can start really maybe putting criminals in prisons for ecocide at the national level. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your question. Did everybody hear that? It was about national level legislation. We aim at the international level to sort of reach that kind of ultimate goal, but of course we support any national government that is also working to legislate. And Kenya may be a case in point, because as you know, there was a proposal put on the table back in June for ecocide to be recognised in Kenya. And this has also happened, this is already... Hello, is that better? And this has already happened in Belgium. It's already been called for. Now, what we know from dealing at the diplomatic level is that when individual countries make moves to legislate nationally, that helps the international initiative as well, and vice versa. So they're mutually reinforcing. And ultimately, when the crime is put in place internationally, it will have to be reflected nationally anyway. People, countries that ratify will mostly put it into their own jurisdictions as well. So both are important. We support both. And the reason we advocate for the international level is to effectively underline that how fundamental this is at a cross-border level. Also because some kinds of environmental crimes, I mean, a lot of them are carried out by transnational corporations. And they're often in breach of existing regulation, but nobody's doing anything about it. But when you put into place an international crime, whoa, that's a little bit more of a sort of concentration of the mind. You know, if your own personal freedom might be on the line and the reputation of your company, whoa, that could be quite important. So hence going for the international level to support all of that law that already exists but isn't currently being enforced. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Something that stood out to me from that answer is private entities and the corporations and how connected our world is. Any single thing that any of us are wearing or eating comes from a different country. That's the globalized world that we've, emerged in. So I think that's why it's so important for it to be an international crime. And like I mentioned earlier, if some countries do it and others not, then the destruction will just be offshored. So thank you so much for that answer, Jojo. Now it's time for the closing. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. I hope you learned something new. I hope you have new vocabulary. Thank you to the panelists for being so knowledgeable and amazing and enthusiastic and really, getting all of these very important languages to the world's highest places. Can we get a round of applause for all of the panelists? Amazing. With that, we conclude the first ever segment of the Youth Pavilion. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Please take a pin on your way out. I'm sure the panels will be happy to talk to you on their way out. Thank you, and a big applause to you also for being here. We made it to COP.